There we go. Just getting the computer working.
Okay, now,
The other one's here. It is really looking at that. After you spend my out, is it plugged in?
It's very slight.
So maybe we ought to try to summarize this article just a little bit. Before we get into it a little bit, for those of you who haven't actually been to the class before, we've been working our way through some materials that I put in a packet, and you unfortunately don't have them. So what the topic is poverty, or being poor, and we're looking at several different kind of aspects of that. And today we're reading, or we had read a chapter by one named Linda Tirado, who kind of describes her life at work. I guess we would describe her as the working poor, or the tolerably poor, I guess. She works 1 or 2 or 3 sometimes part-time jobs, no particular benefits with them, and she describes what it's like to work there. Anything particularly stand out about her description of her work environment that you remember? Have you ever had a job like that? Might be the question.
Well, when you try to get another job, they don't always jive together. They might want you at one, and then the other one, you have to sacrifice and how they can fire you for any reason and let you go.
Yeah.
So kind of moving around a lot.
Was that a new concept to you, this at-will employment and implications of that? How's that?
I haven't been in a job like that.
Never been in a job like that, really? Not even in college?
it brought back memories to me of a job that I had that was quite a little like what she described, except it paid a whole lot. I was in the oil industry, and we were expected to sell our bodies, minds, and souls to the oil industry.
Remember the comment she made that she kind of thinks the job by the scars she has? Yeah, where she literally bleeds for employers. And what was her big complaint though about that? She says, yeah, okay, we take a job like that, we expect it might be kind of difficult and there's some risk to it, but what was the big issue with her? And indeed, the whole issue that I think she was getting at throughout the chapter on that. What bugged her about that? Was it risk or was it something else?
I guess what I remember about it was that she didn't feel much commitment to the employers, but to her fellow workers, and felt very unappreciated. They were just expected to do whatever.
Yeah, the unappreciation thing, the undervalued, the devalued. I mean, doesn't that really kind of run out throughout that whole chapter? I think we noticed that in the beginning, we kind of noticed that at the end. So I
If
mean,
you got hurt, it was just the liability to them. It wasn't that you were hurt
yeah,
or anything like that.
it's like her employers expected her to bleed. Now, I don't know how typical this is, you know, and we need to be kind of careful here, but I think there is a strain of employment where there are a lot of assumptions about people and their skills. That was another thing. Remember, she was asked multiple times, I mean, she was scripted in how she would interact with people, right? Hello, welcome to KFC. She has to say certain kinds of words and stuff like that. And it was sort of as if people didn't really think she had a brain. Now, question is, was she maybe smarter than some of the people who work there or not? I don't really know. What do you think was
she
her?
implied that the rest that her coworkers were smart too, though? I mean, she didn't maybe come right out and say it, but I think she implied it. That
What do you think were the biggest barriers to her for finding kind of meaningful work? I mean, can't you hear yourself saying, well, just get a different job?
Well,
or
she said
go
that-
get some training.
Yeah, she said that if you don't have any money, it's hard to go and get training. can't give up the work time to go and invest, and sometimes. I mean, it costs a lot of money, and.
Especially if you have a family.
Yeah, and childcare, the whole bit.
Maybe as a customer in a restaurant, look at the servers in there. And the, perception, I mean, we watch them and say, oh, that's person, that person. But who knows what's going on behind those things and what the work environment is, and you see some customers not being kind to their servers and that kind of thing. You don't know.
Yeah, there's always more, it seems like, isn't it, before? Do you, would more money just help her? Is that really the whole issue, or what? You'd have a living, so-called living wage.
Well, it's nice to feel good about what you're doing too.
Okay,
It didn't seem like they were valued at all, or the way she was describing it. She was like a monkey, I think it was said, she was a monkey. It's like, where they just tell them what to do and how to do it, when to have a break, or, the whole thing about not having a break sometimes, and then you're sick, or you have to go to the bathroom, that's kind of demeaning.
so, yeah, word to the wise, if you ever have to hire anybody, then you can be kind of aware of some of those sorts of issues. Do you see her as a difficult person?
Good question. I don't know.
I used to, at the work I had, we had actually trainings on how to deal with difficult people. Was she one of them?
I expect her employers thought so, some of them.
Because of what?
She put the interests of her coworkers ahead of her employers.
So is she difficult? Or is the conditions make her difficult, I wonder? Yeah. There's sort of a reciprocal thing going on there, isn't there? I mean, I think she's kind of feisty, don't you?
Yeah.
All right. Another thing that I noticed in that chapter is she reflects an awful lot about being tired, fatigue. What's that all about, do you think? Improper nutrition, not getting enough to eat.
If you're working a couple jobs.
Two
you're gonna be
jobs.
tired.
Yeah,
Stress, unhappiness.
yeah. She definitely indicated, well, she just said she wouldn't give her employers, she got what her employers paid for, that's what she said, and no more. That was as much as she was willing to do, which does sort of suggest that maybe a little more money would have gone a little way to grease the skids.
One of my coworkers back in the oil industry once told me, they don't expect much out of us and we try not to disappoint them.
But you got paid pretty good, didn't you, in the oil business?
We did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is rural Alaska. And,
one of the things we often tell people to try to improve themselves is go back and get some more college or get some training or something like that. But she had some pretty strong opinions about why it was that she couldn't be immersed in the college experience. What do you think of those? Is that just an excuse, or do you really think she was that bound up? Couldn't break out?
Well, you need money to enroll or pay for books, and you also need the time to study, and you also need the time to attend classes or see them online, so I mean.
Yeah, but there's financial aid, you can get paid for, and you get a certain amount of money for living expenses, you get money, they package you for books.
I think, it's kind of what people want to do. I mean, or whoever could probably do it if they really wanted to, but I don't think it's easy.
in the introduction, didn't she say at one point she was going to school? She was
Yeah, she
working
had started school. and she had dropped out.
working 2 part-time jobs, going to school and trying to
And
raise
messing around.
a couple of children.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I just think the situations just becomes sort of oppressive.
Mhm.
Would you call her oppressed though? Through her work? I mean, is that a good word to describe her condition? You talked about stress and so forth, but is that? You know, in the Bible, we read some of the verses last week about don't oppress the poor, lack of injustice. Would you consider that oppression, her experience?
She seemed very disillusioned. She didn't have
Okay.
dreams and hope. Or something,
Our sermon this morning.
yeah, did you think? I didn't see that in her,
It had been kind of
She
cut off
felt
from her.
oppressed.
Yeah,
I think.
You
for
can't,
lack of a dream.
you can't have those things though, if your basic needs aren't being met, that just goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
But it makes it hard to get out of that.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
I don't recall, I didn't read everything, what is her living situation, or what was it?
You mean her housing or?
Yeah, where was she living?
That wasn't clear to me in that chapter
Oh.
either.
You did?
She is married, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wasn't
Said,
homeless.
don't come home and take your frustrations at work out on your spouse.
Well, the thing is, you constantly repeating everything your employer is doing wrong, and you're hearing it in a community of coworkers. That becomes a mindset, and then obviously there's loyalty to the corporation. And I can see how a point of view of feeling oppressed can come out of that. But a lot of it's kind of self-generated. It may not be, no corporation's perfect. But there's many people that are disadvantaged that figure out what their corporation's about and believe in it and grow. In spite of the low level of their position.
People who like apparently to do the rah things at Walmart every
Yeah.
morning. You know, that's right.
The cheer.
Yeah, the cheer. Yeah. Let me read this little piece about what.
I guess I've never, what time of the morning do you need to be there to hear the cheer?
Yeah.
Is there really such? I've never been there.
She says you can Google it, I didn't bother. Yeah. So let me read this, question number 10 on your thing. The National Conference of State Legislatures make the following statement about at-will employment. This is sort of an eye-opener for me. Employment relationships, at-will
At will,
employment.
okay.
That's the kind of work that she does, at-will employment. And here's a,
I mean, at will, they can fire you.
She's still there.
here's what they write about this. Employment relationships are presumed to be at will in all US states except Montana. Interesting. The US is one of a handful of countries where employment is predominantly at will. Most countries throughout the world allow employers to dismiss employees only for cause. Some reasons given for our retention of the at-will presumption includes respect for freedom of contract, employer deference, and the belief that both employers and employees favors at-will employment relationship over job security. That's a pretty big presumption. At-will means that an employer can terminate an employee at any time for any reason except an illegal one, or for no reason without incurring legal liability. Likewise, an employee is free to leave a job at any time for any or no reason with no adverse legal consequence. At-will also means that an employer can change the terms of the employment relationship with no notice and no consequences. For example, one employer can alter wages, terminate benefits, or reduce paid time off. It is in its unadulterated form, the US at-will rule leaves employees vulnerable to arbitrary and sudden dismissal, a limited or on-call work schedule depending on the employer's needs, and unannounced cuts in pays and benefits. Who benefits from at-will employment?
What is that will employment? What is that will employment?
Well, I just read you a definition, John.
You can be fired for no reason.
Yeah, you can be fired for no reason.
Or you can leave for
Or you can leave. That's about the only benefit for the employee. I guess.
relationship is,
No, it is not.
it's kind of at will one direction. Generally, you could quit, but you can't just be fired without cause. basically, yeah.
Yeah, are there jobs that you can't just, I mean, other jobs you can't strike necessarily, right? Like, but I thought, are there jobs that you can't leave?
No, I don't think so. No, I say you can't leave. I think you can leave any job.
Yeah, so that will, is only one way like.
It's
Well-
one way, yeah, but
You can't leave
What's-
in the hospital
Yeah.
in the middle of a shift. Well, accused of, well, being guilty of abandonment.
Oh, okay.
That's a huge,
Okay.
that's a huge cross. to bear.
If you're teaching, you have a contract to fulfill.
But at will seems to be kind of the mode in this sort of tolerable poverty level of service industry jobs.
yeah, I
Part-time
think most of
jobs
those
and
people are in
seasonal
the
jobs.
unions.
So I mean, is that good or bad
Well, if you leave, you're not gonna get a good,
recommendation?
yeah. I mean,
Although that legally is nothing anyway. Like, if somebody leaves us and goes to another place and they call us, all we can tell them is they started work on this date, they ended work on this date, yes, they were employed at our place. Like, you can't give them either a glowing report and you can't also tell them what actually happened, that maybe you were not sad that they left. So
any reference or just?
there could be legal recourse if you do beyond that. So the reference thing is not.
But I mean, if they were a good employee and they didn't leave, but, well, I guess it didn't. leave. Never mind.
Didn't she say at one point though that she signed some kind of forms where she couldn't work at another job or something because even though she was only working part-time,
Mhm.
there was some
Yeah.
kind of constraint that way, but I don't know how much that would stick.
Those are pretty much not legally binding.
The thing in this definition I read is that the belief behind the presumption is that both employers and employees favor at-will employment relationship over job security. What's your, I mean, what do you think about that?
I think the working people would prefer job security, generally speaking.
So that kind of leads me to wonder that maybe at-will is really kind of more for the employer's benefit than it really is for the employer's benefit. So after all this, do you think she's a good employee or not? You know, she seems to be very loyal to the people she works with, right? Remember the little incident where she was parsing out food that was outdated and giving it to employees rather than having to throw it away? Did you cheer her on for that, or do you think that was a good thing? It was illegal for her to do it. If she got caught, she'd probably been fired. Yeah. Would you hire her? Not sure, okay, all right. She does make this observation that, and her words, that the lower classes cover each other at work. And that she says, without that camaraderie, we would never survive. Interesting.
I think when you treat a certain type of job as disposable, like you get to, like, my parents have been through this with the caregivers that they've had come in and help with my dad's situation, and you get people who are either using that as a stepstone to go to nursing school or something. So the ones that are really dedicated and love what they do won't be around very long because they're gonna move on and do something where they step up, right?
Mhm.
And then you get the other ones who, because you only pay them a certain amount, it's kind of like what she was saying, like, I'm only gonna give a certain amount. And they just kind of don't really have an investment in it, you know? And so it's tough because I get the bottom line component, but like you have to show people you value them for them to want to respond in a way to give you the quality work that you're expecting.
So what gives you value in your work from an employer standpoint, do you think? I mean, is there?
Like personally or in general?
Or personally, professionally. I mean, you know, we all kind of work because we need the paycheck and all that, I know, but we've all had jobs where we really enjoyed going to work, and we've had jobs maybe where we were less excited about that. And a lot of her complaint has to do with this notion, this sort of ambiguous thing of being valued. And I can imagine that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but generally speaking, what keeps you experimenting?
I mean, I think for us, it's that I
Other
have,
than your wonderful human being.
it's I have some autonomy. And having worked in larger organizations where you're a cog in the wheel and they don't care what your opinion is and they don't believe in listening to your expertise and how that might help make good decisions. I have a say and some leadership within our organization to where we can make things happen quickly if we need to, and that my voice is heard and that my skill set is valued. And so I'd say that's, even though I've taken some trade-offs, because we don't have benefits and we don't have, I mean, there are things that I gave up going to private practice. Thank goodness I have a husband who's in a union job. You know, that was something for me that was more important, that I wanted to love what I did instead of feeling like I was just an expendable piece of a puzzle that just punched the clock every day.
I think.
So why no benefits?
Oh,
Small private practice, very small operating margins. Insurance keeps cutting down what they pay us and we have to keep our salaries at the level that we're at least. It's just, you know, everywhere else, you know, when the pandemic came around and you go to a restaurant, they charged you more money because it cost them more money to get the supplies and they need to pay their workers more, but in healthcare, they don't care. They just keep cutting down what gets sent in and then saying, figure out how to work with it. So it's just a different, I mean, education is the same way, you know, work more with less, figure it out.
one more thought about or question about Ms. Toronto here. You know, we Christians are full of little biblical bromides, aren't we not? So how do you think Paul's advice to her to be content in all circumstances, is that good advice for her? I couldn't help but think that when I read the chapter. What would I say to this woman? What would I do for her? You know, would I do anything? Where would be the way to, where would you get a hold of the problems that she faces? You know, is it with her directly? Is it feeding on structural issues that affect how she works and how she gets paid? What would be the best use of your time? I don't think telling her to be content would be the first thing you would do. All right.
I think telling someone to be content is different. I mean, that doesn't mean, that means you're satisfied. Or you're not willing to strive for a better position or a better change in what you do. But I think that we can be content in everything that we do, at peace with God. It's different than saying, I don't want to change it. You know, it's like, she can be peaceful and not always troubled in her mind. She can look at the positives, but not be blind to the negatives. When you're content with something, even if you're shoveling dog manure, I mean, you can be content that this is what you're doing right now, but it doesn't mean this is what I always want to do or anything like that. And it doesn't mean you're not thinking about how you want to change, but be content with where you are, be at peace with where you are. I think that's what, you know, when Paul was saying be content, you know, he was in prison and I don't think he meant like, I always want to be in prison. I'm happy. I'm just so good. But finding yourself in circumstances that's not necessarily wonderful, you can still be content in that, you know, just be at peace with that. You know,
or find things that, try to, I would say focus in the right one, but try to find things in your job that you feel good about. Whether you call that contentment or not, but I like doing this, or I like doing that. I don't like this person, I don't like that. Instead of focusing on the bad stuff, focusing on some of the things that work for you. That might make you realize there aren't that many of them, I need to get a different job, but at least you could say, these are the things I like. And I want to do these well, and da da da. So I think you can, you know, even in jobs you don't like, you know, we're in a lot of jobs, you know, people don't always just love what they do, but sometimes they like the people they work with, sometimes they, you know, they like whatever little piece of it there is, and so. You know, it's sometimes people just need a little bit of encouragement.
So as boss, you'd sit down with her and say, you know, look, this isn't perfect, but.
Well, yeah, well, I like these things that you're doing, and I think, you know, well,
That would be alternative
Yeah.
with it, yeah.
I think, yeah, to establish a point of credibility, so. Addressing someone by name regularly, eye contact. That smile on your face, you have this positive energy toward them and express some empathy that they're having some difficult feelings. And when it's encouragement, I think telling them change, I think that's not gonna work very well. I think that it's almost by example. I think you softly gotta move in where you become respected. And you have a chance to continue to share and relationally make an impact on their life because they feel that that you value them. I think they're gonna hear you a lot differently.
they're contributing or they wouldn't be there. You just gotta let them know what they're contributing about, and it doesn't always mean they like it, but at least that, you know, it's.
In the book, does she say anywhere if she's a Christian?
I don't think so. No, not that I know.
And I just want
It's a
to
very secular book.
just throw in something that I just finished a book on mindfulness. And so I don't know the context exactly of Paul talking about contentment, but it probably is in relation to like striving. So, contentment sounds like pacification. I was thinking of the benediction that Kevin just gave, that, we shouldn't be content with like injustice or something like that. But mindfulness, as maybe a different framework to be able to look at, like some studies in the book they were talking about doing, where they had people do the same tasks, but some people they basically gave them a little bit of autonomy or had them think about them in terms of like, fun, make a game out of this or something as opposed to, the others not. And so just that mindfulness of paying attention to those little details can make a difference. That's, not necessarily putting up with things that are, terrible, but finding your way, kind of a strengthening way to endure perhaps.
Kevin, did you have some jobs that when you were changing your life that were kind of didn't feel valued in, like?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. When I first got clean and sober, I was actually working 3 jobs.
Okay,
I was working, doing flooring and finished carpentry under the table. I was also working at a local cafe washing dishes. And I was working at Laos Trust building trusses. And I did not feel appreciated in any of those jobs. My background in construction or production work or something like that, it was most commonly told to us that there's 15 people in the unemployment line waiting for your job, so I had to join them. So there was no, the message was always, we have no problem getting rid of you because we'll just hire somebody else.
and is it hard to get jobs?
Yes, it's really hard to get a job in Washington State with a criminal record, especially. I know there's movement in state legislature to where they'll be removing, have you ever been convicted of a crime off the application process? Because they want people to be offered the job before that's disclosed, because too many employers will, or just trying to rent a house. The second you see, yes, I'm convicted of a crime on a rental or a job application, they move on to the next one. So I know Whatcom County has already taken that off of their employment applications, and I know some other counties are starting to follow suit.
And what gave you the desire, well, I know it was God too, but just to change and, I mean, to really make that, because that's a hard thing for people to. Yeah, I mean.
So I got lucky because when I got clean, I was sleeping in the parking lot of the church. So that community kind of took me in
Okay.
and let me be a part of it. And they helped me get into a residential treatment program. And so that community evolved into I still got very dear friends that were right there when I first came in that I still work with on community-based projects today. And so a couple of weeks ago, I presented to 4 mayors and county commissioner about 30 service providers in Santa Valley, a community-based care initiative of how can we not only work with human service providers, but also work with communities of faith and libraries and things of that nature to help engage with and be communities for people who are coming out of homelessness and drug addiction.
You're such an inspiration, thank you.
Thank you.
Want to turn to the other article? Got a few minutes left. Get into that. Good. Appreciate your contributions, everyone. So, I found this opinion piece by, Miguel De La Torre sort of challenging. He's talking about economic justice and he's basing his comments out of Matthew 20:1-16, the parable of the vineyard owner who hires workers. Did you not get it all?
Right, well, she just passed me the copy and printed it and sent it to me. So,
If you watch it, I mean, it's a file online, just sort of email, I make it bigger print.
yeah.
So you're familiar with the story, right? The vineyard owners who hires employees to come in and work at different points of the day. At the end of the day, they all get paid the same price for the same wage, right? At all. Bring it down. Okay. So, all right, there was something. And then he makes this comment, the biblical teaching is that those who are economically privileged, like the vineyard owner, are responsible for those who are not, while laborers are responsible to provide a full day's work while laborers are responsible to provide a full day's work unless prohibited by circumstances beyond their control. And his main point in this whole thing is that full-time workers who are paid, wait a minute, where is it here? I'm not finding it right off the bat, but he just said that basically employers who do not pay a living wage are stealing from employees. Did I get that right? I think so, yeah. That every employers have an obligation to pay regardless of the work, a living wage, yeah. And that is what comprises economic justice, a living wage. And it is economic injustice if you do not pay employers a living wage. I think that's a crux of the matter. Okay.
I thought this was very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I never thought of that particular, because I don't.
With that
With that parable, it's like, oh, he's just being really nice, giving them a full day's wage at the end of the day. And pull out, I have not thought of it like an economic justice perspective.
Now, I don't want this to degrade into critique of his exegesis, because I don't know how that works, but just look at the point. Just look at the point.
It is.
It's a great point.
I thought so too.
Well, you like it. Well, you employers, how does that feel, I guess? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, you start quibbling over, well, what's a living wage? And as we already discussed in here, the way we define poverty is not a living wage, but then there's a great deal of flexibility of what exactly is a living wage, and people want to get very careful. Well, they can live in constant rental, living many different things for many different people, and so it becomes so complicated, we just don't bother, right?
Or we overcomplicate it on purpose
Well, of course.
to disenfranchise our laborers.
I just wonder what happened, I mean, in terms of, was it Nixon had the war on poverty? And there were, I remember from something that we did for, was it Johnson?
Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson. Yeah.
They had a war on something else.
No, he had a one.
He was a poverty.
Yeah, but I mean, there were strides we were making, right? That wasn't that, I remember that from the documentary that we watched about, like, food insecurity and things, and we had really made a lot of strides, and makes me wonder kind of what happened, when we talk about even like a living wage or something that, you know, my first job was like minimum wage, I didn't think about what was living or not, like a living wage, but we didn't have as much, seems to me, of like, you know, the extremes of poverty and homelessness that we have now from when I was that age. So it's hard for me to think, you know, I think about like, what's a decent job for a kid to work in school to get some walking around money or something like that. But something's happened, and I don't understand exactly what that is, that's created that, you know, that great disparity, you know, income disparity. So, you know, I don't.
Yeah, I don't know
Out there.
quite what happened there either, but there's been a lot of economic cycles and fallouts from all kinds of things. I mean, I think what I've read, and I'm no expert on this too, but in preparation for class, it's just that the cost of living has gone up way faster than, you know, wage increases in this country, and it's just kind of, you know, we've seen that just in the last 3 or 4 years, spikes in rent that are just incredible.
Well, and I think there was that big push for college to be a way for people to work up either into the middle class or out of the middle class and even up further. And like when my parents went to college in the 70s, my mom, the school that she went to was a state school, but if you wanted to take more than 15 hours, anything over 15 hours was free. So she took 20 credit hours every semester because she got 5 free college credit hours and then worked to pay off the rest of it. She came out with no debt at all. And now you look at how much it costs to go to school, and you can't work your way through school anymore. Like, that's not possible. And I think part of it too is we pushed that to the point where we made everyone want to get a college education. And there are people who don't, there are jobs that require a bachelor's degree that don't really need a bachelor's degree. And so you've created this huge cost to enter the middle class working field, and not everyone needs that. And not that I think there's values to a liberal arts education, and I learned a lot of things about, you know, learning how to learn and be critical thinkers. And I'm thinking, you know, but that's a privileged thing that I had the opportunity to do that, right? But I think that there's this huge cost going in, even just the difference between when I went to college and my brother 6 years later, and the debt difference between the two of us is huge. And we can tell you that the professors don't get paid that, so I don't know where the money goes. But it's just this huge cost going in, and then people are like, literally, I'm gonna pay student loans till I die, right? So then you can't buy a house, and then the house costs more to begin with too.
Right.
And so, and you know, if the generation before didn't have the ability to save up, and then their parents couldn't get them, here's a little something to get started to help you with your down payment.
Right.
I mean, you just end up with this situation where you've got people that they just can't, even though they're working and getting a decent, you know, salary, they can't. Childcare is more expensive. I mean, you just add all these pieces to it, and I don't, the world got more complex.
It's
Yeah.
really hopeless.
When I went to college in the late 1960s at a public university, there was no tuition. And so of course, I don't think any of us came out with debt. I mean, it just wasn't part of the deal. People were willing to support universities and government, frankly, in those days, in the 60s and 70s, and that has changed.
Yep.
I mean, it's just gone from day to night, sort of. And our public schools, Cada University, have been so unsupported in recent years, so many decades, that they've been underfunded and teachers have been underpaid, that it's now coming back to bite us.
Yes.
So, anyway.
No, this state
That's my
based
soapbox.
schools based on stump tax, I thought they could have changed it to tips from computers a long time ago, because what do you harvest more of in the economy? That it should be, it was stump tax because that was a major part of the economy, but that system of taxation on the industry, it didn't shift, it didn't change with the reality of where industry's gone. And so you end up with this holding on to this tight budget, and it's like
Right.
having to beg money to support teachers. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, every single time they talk about cutting taxes or cutting the budget, I mean, the recent budget they just had, The Republican Party really did not want to cut defense spending, but of course, they immediately look at cutting Medicare. And they immediately look at cutting education. So medical care, education, which are the two things that need to function, which honestly should not be treated like a business, they should just be a public good. That is what they keep cutting.
It keeps up, and
Yeah.
public good is kept up to pace.
Right.
I think there's also a piece where the capitalism thing really fed things, because we've been fed this, you need to have the newest pair of shoes, the newest clothes, you gotta have a new phone, you also have to have a laptop. I mean, look at how many technology pieces you have to function anyway.
And to buy the services to go with them.
Right. That's all fine, that's all. Parents, I swear, wore the same clothes for like 30 years because my grandma was still wearing stuff that was popular 30 years before, but they could. But who's it really favoring and who's really benefiting from it? So there's just a mentality of that's it's so ingrained in who we are as a country, it's hard to break from it.
Were you,
If it's sustainable,
No.
were you intending to foment like a Bolshevik revolution? I mean, I don't know. Because you're on the way there.
well, it's easy to understand how that happens.
Yeah, it is.
Sure it is. Yeah, I mean, it seems like we need underpaid people for our economy to work efficiently.
Well, because originally they did it was with people they didn't pay and they were called
Right.
slaves.
Yeah.
Right,
And so this is how we've tried to keep our financial,
Right.
you know,
that upside down pyramid basically is still, like, I mean, it's been in place since we were using slave labor. We're just finding new ways to force people who are poor down into that position again.
Do you think it's intentional?
Yes,
Or is it just,
100%.
or is it not, you're talking conspiracy theories, or is it
No,
just
it's
sort
not.
of a-
Not,
sort of a,
it's a feature of white supremacy, and it's a feature of the fact that our system has always worked this way. It is functioning as designed.
It's a function of unregulated capitalism.
Yeah, I think more capital.
No reform.
I mean, you know, you try to do things as cheaply as you can. Because if your job is to run this thing cheaply and, you know, and in some industries, you need a certain quality of person that you know you have to pay. You know you have to, but there's also, in some industries, you don't need that. And, so you either you send it offshore to where it's cheap, and then when it's not cheap there anymore, and I'm not against people coming in the country, just bring in more cheap labor, because these people will do the work. I mean, you
And
know,
then,
I talked about this before, you try to hire somebody to work in the fields and you should work, and even if you want to pay them a bit of a living wage, most of them won't work, because they don't want to work in the sun. They don't want to be,
yeah, college kids don't do harvesting like they.
no, and so it's,
now's the generation.
so it's,
Well, and as that employer, you know, I couldn't really pay more. I wanted to,
right,
but I couldn't because we eat the cheapest food in the world.
right.
We're addicted to eating cheap food. That's just the way the system is, and there just wasn't money there. I was only making about half as much in my own business as I did when I was a grunt in the oil industry. So.
All
And
right,
these questions, I just go, these are hugely important what y'all are talking about, because now, and with the UAW is, I'm afraid, with the robotics and then AI coming on, you have a whole regime of the cheap labor is actually a machine that
yeah,
you buy it once and it keeps operating, and you got technicians, you're gonna need a technical staff to support it. But it's a whole different type of labor force. So that's where you can see where the people doing the software is, that is a land of opportunity.
That's a challenge for our country.
Yeah.
Pam actually said, I said, well, what do you want to come out of this? She said, it'd be nice to know what to do. So I'm just gonna plant a seed here. At the end of this, we're gonna maybe deal with some strategies or whatever, but clearly, from the conversation I'm getting around here, if ever you wanted to look at a structural issue that seems to affect a lot of people and keeps them in poverty, the system that we have so strongly embraced in this country and have allowed to get away from us is probably one of those structures. And you might think about how you might want to bang on that a little bit as we look to the future.
Right.
So, Lord, help us to do that. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Support the unions.
And thank you, folks, for joining us. I don't know who you are.